Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free impartial advice on all your debt.
Razabani for IFL TV in association with MTK Global. With me, the man with the knowledge, the man who breaks the news, the man whose Twitter timeline has been very busy about memes about Donald Trump over the last couple of days, Mr. Dan Rafael himself. Dan, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. It's a great day in America because we're going to have a new president.
I mean, as I said, I've been focusing on your Twitter timeline, and normally it's boxing breaking news, but it's just memes after memes after memes. Franchise champions, all sorts of different champions they're calling.
Like I said, it's a wonderful day in America that Donald Trump is going to be out of a job January 20th.
Dan,
so now we can get back. Now we can get back to boxing.
There's a lot going on in boxing. Big news broke this week. I remember speaking to you a couple of weeks ago where we discussed Canelo's lawsuit against Golden Boy and Dazn. I think they made him an initial offer, didn't accept it, and now they've come to an agreement that they're going to part ways. Could you just give us a little bit more detail about what the exact parting ways means? Does it mean that Canelo will never fight on Dazn again? Has it ended smoothly with Oscar on friendly terms? What is the latest with the situation?
Well, first of all, as far as if he'll ever fight on Dazn again, I don't think you can ever say never in this business. I mean, I've seen plenty of acrimonious breakups between fighters and promoters and networks and this and that, and doesn't mean it's forever. Forever is a long time, particularly in a business like boxing. I mean, long before Canelo Alvarez, was at the level he's at now, when he was still a young star coming up, Golden Boy was tied to HBO, and they left and they took all their business to Showtime, where Canelo had a number of his bigger fights, and then they came back to HBO, where Canelo had even more bigger fights. So, when it comes to network switching, I guess you never say never. Certainly, it did not end on good terms between Canelo and Oscar. That's very obvious. Frankly, I don't know if it was when we were talking a couple of weeks ago or when I had done some other conversation with somebody else, but my impression for quite a while was that the ultimate end result of this situation was going to be that Oscar/Golden Boy and Canelo would part ways in some form or fashion, and perhaps Canelo would stay on DAZN if they wanted to pay the contract, or they would reach some sort of settlement. So the fact that he's no longer promoted by Golden Boy does not surprise me at all. I'm maybe slightly more surprised that he ended up parting ways with DAZN, but they just don't want to come up with the money, so that doesn't surprise me either. And he goes back on pay-per-view. And I'm not sure why boxing fans are cheering that, because now instead of having 2 Canelo fights per year, plus whatever other offerings DAZN has, which includes the rest of the Golden Boy fights, that includes guys like Ryan Garcia or Virgil Ortiz or Joseph Diaz or any of their other young prospects, not to mention what you get from the Matchroom events, both the UK fights as well as the fights that Eddie puts on in the United States, all of that for $100. Now Canelo will be back on pay-per-view in America, where the fights cost about $80. So, the cost to boxing fans just economically is much greater. Be that as it may, that's certainly Canelo's right, and he is a big star, and he will generate a lot of money. But he is done with DAZN. When I say go their separate ways, it's a break. I mean, the DAZN people termed it to me a clean break. They each go their separate ways. Same thing with Golden Boy, and they're just not attached anymore. But Golden Boy and DAZN remain attached. I don't know if they redid their deal or worked out new parameters of it or whatever they did. But if you want to see Golden Boy events and you're in the United States, or frankly, I guess around the world, because they're about to launch their service in 200 other territories, including in the UK, in the coming weeks, that will be the place you see Golden Boy fights for the foreseeable future.
Where's it likely that Canelo goes? There's a lot of talk at the moment. I spoke to Leonard Ellerby 9-10 days ago, and about the 3 famous letter word pay-per-view, and he said, and we know Oscar and Eddie last year were bashing pay-per-views dead, etc., and I spoke to Leonard about it, and Leonard said, listen, we're trying to build marquee fighters and give them unlimited earning capacity like Gervonta Davis. Now we know that Canelo does great numbers on pay-per-view, but where is it likely that he goes, because his options are quite limited, right?
Well, I mean, you only need number one, you only need one place that embraces you. And he could also go the route and do things on his own. He's been on pay-per-view numerous times, so he has people around him that sort of know that business. He could, he could make some kind of deal with Al Haymon and the PBC in some form or fashion. I'm not saying, I don't see him doing some kind of long-term deal with a promotional entity. He doesn't need that. If they want to guarantee him a certain amount of money, he can fight a marquee fight and everybody can make some money. He has a long-standing relationship from his previous bigger fights with Showtime. Remember, Showtime in America, which has a deal with PBC, they were the network where he did his biggest fight that he's ever had on pay-per-view, and that was when he fought Floyd Mayweather. Those were the numbers that fight generated. Obviously, was a big part of that was Floyd for sure, but Canelo gets a lot of credit for that finished number that they did, and that was the biggest fight he's ever had in terms of economics. It generated much more money than the Triple G fights, as big as they were, and the Cotto fight and other events that he's been involved in. So, I know that Showtime is interested as long as he's free and clear. They're not looking for a lawsuit. No one's suggesting that he's still got any contractual attachments. In the piece that I wrote about their parting ways, which I wrote for the Ring Magazine's website, I had Canelo's attorney saying he was free and clear. You have his manager, Eddie Reynoso, saying he's free and clear. Had a statement from Oscar De La Hoya saying everybody's free and clear of each other. Had comments from a spokesperson from Dazn saying they're free and clear from each other. So you have every entity involved saying, we're good to go and he can go about his business. Then I think any entity out there will talk to him. I mean, there's also certainly the possibility that a Top Rank or ESPN may at least have a conversation to see what his economic requirements are to do events. Certainly they're in the pay-per-view business with ESPN. I mentioned Showtime. PBC, who was involved with Showtime, also was involved with Fox, which does pay-per-views regularly. They've got the one coming up in December with Errol Spence and Danny Garcia. So Canelo is, he'll have suitors. There's really only one legit pay-per-view attraction in this country, in the United States, and that's Canelo Alvarez. And that's no disrespect to, an Errol Spence who's drawn solid numbers for some of his recent pay-per-view events, or anybody else whose fights go on pay-per-view. But the king of that platform at the moment, in the post-Floyd Mayweather Manny Pacquiao era, is Canelo Alvarez. And so if you're in that business, you're going to want to at least talk to the guy and see what he's got in mind for his future fights.
Is PBC and Showtime most likely his top option, considering they have most of the kind of between 154, 175, they have most of the big names?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's logical. Again, I don't think he's going to go do any kind of long-term deal with PBC, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think. I mean, there's been a lot of conversation about maybe he'll come back in December. It's very obvious, and this is not a secret by any stretch. He wants to fight before the end of this year. Maybe they'll do something with PBC. Caleb Plant, the IBF super middleweight world champion who was undefeated, his name has certainly come up in the conversation. That was a fight that had been suggested, going back several months ago when they were looking for an opponent for May before they had settled on Billy Joe Saunders, which ultimately never took place because of what happened with the virus. Everything was shut down. As you said, you're absolutely right. Between 154 and 175, there are a number of quality fights that Canelo could have at PBC. There are still some fights with some of Eddie's guys and maybe with some Top Rank guys, but certainly the majority of those fights that would be significant. They fight on the PBC platform, so it seems logical.
We know DAZN pushed the subscribers last year. We know they put on KSI, put Logan Paul fights just to push their numbers quite high. They rely on subscribers. We all know that. It's quite obvious. But how damaging is it losing someone like Canelo? And also, they've got someone they call Triple G, who they kind of brought in for this trilogy fight. How much impact is it going to have on DAZN as a business?
Well, as far as Triple G goes, he did sign a contract that was 6 fights over the 3-year period of time that was worth, like $100 million. So he was being highly paid. But the reason that they even wanted to do that deal in the first place really was because they wanted him to have the third fight with Canelo. If Canelo was no longer at DAZN, certainly Golovkin as a name and as a popular fighter unto himself still has value. I'm just not sure he has value at the level that they are obligated to pay him, because there is no prospect at this moment in time of a third Canelo fight because of what just occurred. So his value to DAZN is greatly diminished, it seems to me. And it's unfortunate. He's had, he didn't do anything wrong in this situation. Triple G is the one that wanted to fight Canelo. He was ready, willing, able. He told him he would do it. They had agreed on terms, from what I understand. And he kind of was left out in the cold because it was Canelo that was, unwilling at that time to make the fight. Then the virus came along and it kind of messed everybody's schedule up. So in fact, he's had 2 fights for DAZN under this monstrous contract. One against Steve Rolls, which was a very low-level kind of matchup, did not attract a big crowd, did not get a huge amount of publicity. Then he had the Deverenchenko fight, which turned out to be a hell of a fight, a really exciting fight. But again, it wasn't a big promotion. It wasn't a big-time fight. And so right now, DAZN has got 2 sort of fights that didn't really do much for their business. and they're left without the prospect of the Canelo fight. Supposedly, he'll fight in December on DAZN. I think December 19th is a date that his team has been talking about. He has the mandatory against Zermeta from Poland. And that's another fight that's not a big-time fight. That's not going to generate subscriptions. They're not going to be able to have a big crowd, obviously. And now you're DAZN, what do you do? So maybe they'll try to work out a similar sort of situation where he's released the way Canelo was. Of course, Canelo's is a little bit different because if you read the lawsuit that Canelo filed against DAZN, Oscar De La Hoya had a real reason to make a settlement and to part ways, because, at least if you believe what the lawsuit said, that if there was some kind of problem, that Oscar De La Hoya personally was on the hook for the $280 million that was left on his contract. I don't think there's an issue with that in terms of Triple G, but they just don't have the opponents for him. Now, at the number that he requires under his contract, they just might not want to pay it, even though there are still reasonable fights. I mean, no reason why Canelo couldn't fight. I mean, Triple G, for example, couldn't fight the same kinds of opponents that were put forward for Canelo, a Demetrius Andrade, a Callum Smith, a Billy Joe Saunders, people of that level. Those are all somewhat intriguing fights. They're for major world titles, and those are recognizable quality fighters. But again, I don't know if those generate the kind of business that DAZN wants. So the Canelo situation is one thing. Triple G is kind of in a bad spot right now. And I forget what the first part of the question was.
I forgot what the first part of the question was as well, Dan. No,
Well,
is it damaging? Was it damaging to DAZN?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I guess there's two ways to look at it. On the one hand, is it damaging? If you're DAZN and you're paying $35 million, well, really, you're paying $40 million in a license fee to Golden Boy Promotions to put on a Canelo Alvarez event, and you're not generating the kind of subscribers that you want, now suddenly you don't have to pay that money. So that may be a benefit for them, because that money's not going out the door and then they're not getting the kind of return that they want. On the other hand, you basically are telling the entire, at least in this country, you're saying we're throwing in the towel on boxing. We don't care, because we just let the biggest attraction in the sport and our franchise face of our entire company walk away, and we got nothing for it. So yeah, we're still going to do a handful of Golden Boy shows a year, and we're still going to have on some of these matchroom events, both from America and the UK, but we don't have that megastar that we said we were going to give you, the subscriber, pay-per-view level fights for a monthly subscription fee. Yes, they still have, at least for the time being, they'll have an Anthony Joshua fight with Pulev. I'm not sure how long his agreement goes. They'll have a Triple G fight, but again, I'm not sure, Zermeta qualifies as the caliber of fight that you would think of as a pay-per-view. So they really don't have those pay-per-view level fights right now that they promised. So on the one hand, they probably could be happy because they're not going to be shedding the 40 million. On the other hand, they might be disappointed because they've lost a franchise, their franchise.
As you mentioned, they come into the UK for Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell has fought on Sky Sports for most of his career with Eddie Hearn. With Sky Sports deal soon to run out with Eddie over the coming, I believe within the next 12 months or so, do you have any insight on what could potentially happen here in the UK, Dan, in terms of Eddie's alignment with DAZN and Eddie's alignment with Sky Sports? Surely you can't do some fights here and some fights there. Surely he'll be on one broadcast.
You would think, although it's not an unprecedented situation. I say that using an American example, where you have PBC gets a number of dates and a lot of money from the Fox networks to do fights on their platform, and he does the same thing in terms of dates and events and money that comes from Showtime. So he has two broadcast outlets, and there are certainly, if you examine the kinds of fights that each of the networks do, some people would say he favors Showtime from time to time. Others might say he favors Fox from time to time. It's really difficult in this business to satisfy two broadcasters. And to be honest, PBC has a pretty deep stable of fighters, so he can do it to some degree. It's not easy, but it can be done. And nothing against Eddie, but I just don't think he's got a stable deep enough, frankly, of top fighters where he can do satisfactory events that's going to please the DAZN and please the Sky. So I think you're right. He's going to have to be on one or the other. Now, the reason, though, that the Luke Campbell fight with Ryan Garcia will be on DAZN in the UK, because I think they're launching around that time frame, is because it's not technically a matchroom event. That's a fight where Eddie and the Golden Boy made a deal, and it's Luke Campbell going to fight on a Golden Boy show. So Golden Boy is the promoter of the event, and so if their fights are on DAZN, it's not a matchroom fight. It's kind of like if you take a look at a fight that Eddie did in America last year, where he was the co-promoter of Maurice Hooker, and they did the fight for unification at 140 with Jose Ramirez, who was a top-ranked fighter who has been fighting on ESPN. But that wasn't an ESPN or top-ranked fight because they got the permission to go and do the deal with Matchroom. And so that fight appeared on DAZN in America, not on ESPN. It's the same thing. Luke Campbell will be fighting on DAZN in the UK because that's the promoter of the show. He doesn't have to stay on Sky because it's not a Matchroom card. Simple as that.
A number of weeks ago, we saw Teofimo Lopez gather some more belts in his collection. Funny enough, one of the belts was seen last night with Devin Haney, the WBC green belt. Devin is saying, "I am the WBC champion." Teofimo says, "I am the undisputed champion." What's what?
I mean, I think we discussed this previously about that whole situation. Here's the bottom line, and nothing against Teofimo Lopez. He's the #1 lightweight in the world, period. He proved it. He beat Lomachenko non-controversially. He picked up other belts. He unified titles. But Devin Haney is, in fact, the WBC lightweight champion. This is not my opinion. This is a fact. Look on their website. Look on any listing of champions. Look at anything to do with the fight. He's the WBC champion. And I've said this a million times to a variety of people. When the WBC created the franchise title, it was explicitly said that it could not or would not transfer in the ring. It was specifically made for almost an honorary thing for superstar fighters with a special place in the sport based on their past accomplishments, and nothing whatsoever against Teofimo Lopez. But until he defeated Lomachenko, he didn't have those kind of accomplishments that would put him in that position to be a franchise champion. He had won a belt against a regular opponent in Richard Comey. It's a good win for him, but I don't know if anybody, being honest with themselves, would say that's some kind of special achievement relative to the types of achievements that Canelo had accomplished or even that Lomachenko had accomplished. So they just sort of changed the rules midstream after Devin Haney got the belt. Why did Devin Haney get that WBC belt? He was the interim champion. He was the mandatory for Lomachenko. And I'm not saying Lomachenko was ducking Devin Haney because I don't believe he was, but Lomachenko had a very lucrative, very significant fight against Lopez to unify his other belts with. They were with the same promoter. They were with the same broadcaster. He was making, probably the biggest purse he's ever made. So he became the franchise champion, and they made the fight with Lopez. And so therefore, Devin Haney was out in the cold, but he still was then elevated to the WBC champion. So Teofimo Lopez, he's a tremendous young fighter. I'm a huge fan. He's exciting, and he talks great, and he promotes himself, and he does the business inside the ring. And he's the WBC franchise champion. But he ain't the world champion of the WBC. He is the lightweight world champion, has unified titles, but the WBC title is Devin Haney's, and they defended it last night. As you mentioned, he scored a one-sided, near shutout decision against Yuriorkis Gamboa. But not the most exciting fight, but he got the job done. Took really no damage in the fight. And, won, in my opinion, I was watching it, I had it a shutout. Two judges had it a shutout. One judge, I believe, gave Gamboa 2 rounds, and he moves on. And the way that you settle the disagreement, because there's certainly a faction of people that think that, Teofimo is quote-unquote undisputed. But to me, there's a dispute. It doesn't mean he's not good. It doesn't mean he's not the champ. It doesn't mean he's not unified. It just means he's not the WBC champion. So how do you settle that? You fight each other. And so if Lopez and Devin Haney can get together in the ring, they can settle that dispute. But until further notice, or until he gets the actual WBC title, he's not undisputed. That's my opinion.
Also, De La Hoya's name wasn't just mentioned alongside Canelo this week. It was also mentioned alongside Marcos Maidana as a potential comeback fight. What is going on, Dan? Because we know Mike Tyson, Roy Jones are getting together end of this month, and it's going to be an exhibition of 2 past greats. Is Oscar coming back as an exhibition? Is he want the money? Is he want legacy? Is he want titles? What is the reason why Oscar is even considering coming back into the ring?
Well, certainly, I don't think Oscar needs to fight for his legacy or even, frankly, for the money. Certainly, it's not going to enhance his position in the sport. He's, 6 division titles. He's, won 10 world titles in 6 weight divisions. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's one of the greats of his era. He doesn't have to prove anything about that. Won an Olympic gold medal. But, like a lot of fighters, he has that itch he wants to scratch. So he's been training. He's been getting himself in shape. He's, supposedly from what people around him have said to me, he's not drinking at this point. So he's taking care of himself much better than he had been. And he wants to fight. And so when they look for what that may entail, obviously you have to get an opponent. So while I don't think 100% that he's actually going to get in the ring, but if you're going to even think about doing that, you have to be prepared. So they've been talking to different people about the prospect of possible opponents. Now, Marcos Maidana, who also has been retired for quite a while, although not nearly as long as the 12 years that Oscar's been out of the ring since he retired in the months following his loss to Manny Pacquiao. in 2008. I think he announced his official retirement in early 2009. Maidana hasn't fought since the second fight where he lost a decision to Floyd Mayweather. That's like, what, 2014 or so? So it's been a little less time. And he's obviously a little younger than Oscar, for sure. But the thing about it is, you know, Oscar says he wants to fight a real opponent. Okay, Marcos Maidana obviously is a real guy, even if he's been retired. And the main thing is Marcos Maidana has been talking about a comeback in addition to that. So when Marcos Maidana's people have been out there talking to promoters about, you know, what's available and would somebody be interested, at the point where he had a conversation with Golden Boy, which, by the way, had been his promoter for quite a long time. They promoted those Mayweather fights. They promoted many of his big fights. They promoted his Adrian Broner fight and, you know, any number of other matches he was in against Eric Morales. And I mean, just look down his list of fights. Most of his American fights, you know, he was with Golden Boy Promotions. So within the discussion with them about, you know, would you be interested to bring Marcos back, the subject was broached between Golden Boy and Marcos's representative about, well, you know, what do you think about a possibility at some Oscar fight? Obviously, if you're Marcos Maidana, that would be attractive because it's a high-profile event and you probably get paid a lot of money for it. So I think that's where that came from. That's not to say that he's the opponent or it's any kind of done deal, but that was the information that I had, that I wrote that piece about for Boxing Scene. And, you know, he remains a name that if Oscar actually does come back, that they would discuss as a serious possibility to be his opponent. And it's, by the way, what Oscar's plan is not what Mike Tyson and Roy Jones are doing. His intentions are to have a sanctioned actual boxing match, not an exhibition.
Interesting. We'll see what comes across with that.
Yeah.
Dan, just finally, I want to end on a video that came out 8-9 days ago now. Deontay Wilder posted a video on his Instagram and wrote a deep kind of, he wrote some tweets as well. He done a couple of interviews afterwards as well. I know you have a great relationship with Shelley, who is his manager. A lot of people I've spoken to, and I don't really need to say what was said, you know what was said, but a lot of people that I spoke to said someone around him needs to put their hand around his shoulder and tell him just to stay away from media, to social media. It was a PR disaster, what took place last week. What's your reaction?
Okay, I'll preface it by saying I'm a big Deontay Wilder fan. I've covered Deontay's entire career. I was at his professional debut. I've interviewed him countless times. I've spent time with him. He's a good dude. He really is. And I mean, people maybe don't necessarily, that doesn't come across to some people in the way he speaks in the public, but Deontay is a good guy and an exciting fighter. And I have all the respect in the world for him. The way he has handled himself in the post-loss to TysonFury in the rematch has been very disappointing. Obviously, he's got some issues that he's trying to work out and trying to, you know, and he's not the first fighter to ever go through a situation where he's trying to figure out, like, how did I lose? He was undefeated. How could I possibly have lost this fight? You have to find a reason. Deontay has come up with like 7 of them. I mean, Mark Breland, who's one of the most decent, you know, guys in the business, who's been, you know, a very respected Olympic gold medal winner, 2-time world champion as a professional trainer, a very mild-mannered, quiet, nice guy who knows his business, who cared about Deontay Wilder, and that's why he threw in the towel. For Deontay to say that he, you know, is disloyal, that, you know, he felt like maybe he spiked his water with muscle relaxant, make the accusation that the referee, Kenny Bayless, you know, was somehow intoxicated in the ring, which is ridiculous, to make many accusations about things related to TysonFury, his actions, his gloves, which obviously, you know, I wrote a detailed piece with comments from Bob Bennett from the Nevada Athletic Commission about how they handle the gloves and the things they do in terms of having inspectors there to check things out and in the dressing room, and how they deal with it after the weigh-in. You know, to suggest that his gloves were tampered is pretty preposterous, if you ask me, because Deontay really can't keep the story straight. Well, did he manipulate the padding? Did he have something in it? You know, that there's just so many things, and that you're right. Somebody needs to put their arm around him that he respects and say, listen, you're just, you know, what's the old saying in crisis management? You know, the first thing to do is when you're digging a hole, you know, is stop digging. I mean, he just keeps digging himself into the hole, and you know, it looks bad for everybody that's involved with him, and you know, he's not getting the third fight with Wilder with Fury at the moment, obviously, because Fury is moving on. They claim that they're free and clear by the date that was specified to do the rematch in the contract. So he's moving forward with this fight that's supposed to be in early December. They're supposedly, from what I'm told, they're finalizing the paperwork with Agat Kabiel, which was you know, an opponent that I had said was the target of this fight, you know, several weeks ago. So it looks like that will probably happen. And then for Wilder, he's gotten so much bad publicity for this, and that video certainly did not help. It's just been a mess. All the things he said, I kind of feel bad for Deontay because he's struggling a lot. I think more mentally than physically about what happened. And it was a confidence shattering loss, and he gave him his first defeat, and took away his world title, and that was in many ways his identity.
Could you potentially see a lawsuit coming from Deontay's side? Obviously, there was a time scale on this fight to happen, but we've obviously had COVID-19 in the midst of it. Do they have any kind of reasonings to say, well, listen, these are exceptions. These are, things that don't normally happen in life. It's a rare occasion. And can he stop a potential anti-Joshua and TysonFury getting in the ring next year?
I mean, I don't think any of us can really answer that with authority, only because it's not like they've given us a copy of their paperwork and their contract. But it seems to me that when you have people like, Bob Arum and his team at Top Rank, the people that are involved with TysonFury, such as Frank Warren and MTK, these are experienced people in this business, and everybody on their side is moving forward with an event, not the least of which is, the television entities that are involved. None of those people, any of those groups, they don't want a gigantic lawsuit hanging over them unless they're pretty sure that they're free and clear. And as far as I know, Tyson had announced that he's doing this December fight, a number of weeks ago. To the best of my knowledge, there has not been any legal assertion. It's one thing to say, no, he's got to fight us. That's one thing to go in the press and have your team, speak up on your behalf, whoever it is. But to my knowledge, it's not like anybody sent anybody at Frank Warren's company or at MTK or at Top Rank, a legal letter, cease and desist making a December 5th fight because, XYZ is in our contract. So, I think right now they're just out of luck. They can complain about it and they can be disappointed about it. But, this third fight seemed in trouble. First it was supposed to be in July. Deontay had an injury from the first fight that required some surgery, so he was out for a little while. Then the virus, of course, shut things down. They were looking to do it in October. That did not happen. And then they were, of course, looking at the December date, which was a fight date that was okay with the promoters. But the networks, Fox in America, which is Wilder's broadcaster, Fury's broadcaster, ESPN, basically said to the promoters, no, we're not doing a big pay-per-view on that day because in our country, that is a Saturday in the afternoon and in the evening where you have major American college football championship games, which are very popular events, very big ratings getters. And the perspective, and this is how Bob Arum explained it to me in the piece that I wrote, why are they going to spend all that money to promote and market a pay-per-view that needs to generate money to cover everybody so we can make a profit when the networks are busy doing these major college games and don't want to devote the resources to it because the eyeballs of this country sports-wise are going to be watching those college football games. It's conference championship time, and they're a big deal. So, when they set up that December 19th date, those college football games were not yet scheduled because nobody knew at the time whether there was going to be able to have those games take place because they hadn't rejiggered their schedule once, because of the virus. Then when things were able to be rescheduled, they landed those games on that December 19th date, and it suddenly made it very unappealing for both networks to do a pay-per-view because ESPN has, five big games that day. Fox, I think, has about 2 big games that day. So, it just didn't make sense for those networks to move forward when there's a lot of money in the line for these entities.
Okay, Dan, we wait and see what happens the next couple of weeks. We've got some big fights coming up over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, Tyson, Roy Jones, even though it's an exhibition, I'm still looking forward to it. Badou Jackson, Vidal Riley, Ryan Garcia, Luke Campbell. We've got Errol Spence, Danny Garcia, AJ Poulet, Fury back. So a lot of boxing going on. So I'm sure I'll definitely be dropping you a line and say, Dan, let's roll it back again.
Sounds good. Anytime.
Dan Rafael for IFL TV. Thank you very much.
Is your debt causing you sleepless nights? Knock your debt out with Debt KO. And your debt won't be the only thing keeping you up at night. Debt KO, free, impartial advice on all your debt.